Hello and welcome back to this place, and today we're going to be taking a look at some of these things. Those were made by Eric. Amazing woodwork. And we're taking a look at a couple of new Super 7 items. It is Mandora, the evil chaser from Thundercats, and her bike, the Electro-Charger. And this harkens back to the old days of Masters of the Universe Classics, where they would come in these brown mailer boxes, even though they weren't the actual box it was mailed in, but just to protect the packaging. And both of these items are still available on Big Bad Toy Store. They are a higher priced item though, so you're gonna have to be a pretty big Mandora fan in order to splurge for both the figure as well as the Electro-Charger. This is as expensive as Super 7 figures are these days. This was really expensive, so it was a case of out with the old and in with the new, selling a few of the older things in my collection in order to finance something that I never thought they would make. And a quick peek at the box, all sorts of different accessories. I really think that they could cut down the cost of some of these figures if they would just cut back on some of the extra hands. It is really nice to get some of these accessories though. Cop needs handcuffs, some communicators here, 2 alternate heads, so they really go all out. Her weapon as well as her weapon in motion with a flame trail on it. It's really nice to get them, but maybe more people would be able to afford them if they didn't have all those accessories. After all, back in the day, the LJN Thundercats figures didn't come with extra heads and extra hands, and most of them only one accessory. And the Electro-Charger box, Mandora's interstellar transport vehicle. It is quite hefty. And this really harkens back to the vintage Thundercats vehicles, even though the vintage ones didn't have windows on them. Picture on the side kind of reminds me of how those were, and the Super 7's packaging is always top notch, and maybe that's another thing that really drives the price up. And here's Mandora with all of her accessories out. And oh, before I go any further, this reminds me, I have gotten complaints from just a few people, but in the past I've gotten complaints about wearing a bandana on my wrist. They're not fans of my fashion choice. Even though such greats as Barry Windham and the greatest of all time, no argument there, Macho Man Randy Savage, were known for wearing bandanas on their wrists. The Rock and Roll Express did too, but you'll never get me to admit that I was influenced by them. So, in order to make sure I don't get any complaints, it's not to cover anything up or anything, it's just I like the look of it. I'm going to take that one off, and I don't know, could borrow my wife's pink one, but it doesn't really match my complexion, so Louis, you can't borrow it either for the same reason. I think for this review, this will make everybody happy. I'll get one of the Macho Man official bandanas and put that on instead, and since he is the greatest of all time, I think that should please everybody. And wearing a wristband that says Macho Man is especially fitting for this review because this is one macho lady. She appeared a couple of times on the Thundercats TV show back in the 80s. She wasn't a one-and-done character, and when she appeared, she wasn't just a bit part player. She was featured. So over the last 30 years or so, it's been odd to see so many obscure characters from Star Wars, Star Trek, Transformers, so many other properties, which had, sometimes even in Star Wars case, just a couple of seconds of screen time, get multiple figures on the various Star Trek shows, the TOS and TNG shows. Playmates would do characters who only appeared once and sometimes just briefly. In Transformers, DevCon is finally getting his own figure, and he only made one animated appearance back in the 80s. So those properties are all bigger and more popular than Thundercats. But this is the first piece of Mandora merchandise ever, as far as I know, There might be something really obscure out there, like some stickers. I don't believe there's even a Funko Pop of her. Or Kabaya gum toy in Japan. I don't believe so. So that's why I decided to get this figure, because I've just been a fan of hers for a while. She existed before RoboCop. And you gotta wonder if she might have inspired RoboCop's look a little bit. Her first appearance was in an episode in 1985. RoboCop came out in 1987, so think it over, creep. Now, one thing that's really necessary for all of these 6 and 7 inch figures, especially for the purpose of review, is a stand. So I've just picked up a big bag of these off of eBay, and they work great for classified figures. I'm also finding they work great for some other figures like Kenner's Real Ghostbusters, Kenner's Aliens, 90s Aliens figures, and the classified stand is perfect for Mandora. So if you want to pick up a cheap bag of stands on eBay, Star Wars Black Series as well, compatible. If you just do a search for Star Wars Black Series stands or G.I. Joe classified stands, that makes a colossal difference. There's 2 pegs on them, just like there's 2 holes in her feet. So you can still have her in various running poses. Let's see, what's the rule? Opposite arm forward. We're already getting into some posability here with her, but you'll be able to do various action poses a lot better than without the stand. It'd be pretty much impossible with her narrow feet. She comes with a whole bunch of different hands. Claw, kind of grabbing. This reminds me of the Orion Quest or Duke Fleed 10-inch figure hand, just kind of like a reaching forward hand. A few of them actually. Trigger finger. She doesn't actually come with any sort of a shooting weapon, but there is a trigger finger. A pointing finger. These are great. These look great on so many different figures, especially wrestling figures, because wrestlers really were influenced by Muhammad Ali, and Muhammad Ali was all about the finger pointing in the face. Thumbs up as well. That's cool. And the ones that are already in there are fists. Now, before even trying these, I think these are a potential breaking point. These are so tiny. Even though this figure is much bigger than a 4-inch G.I. Joe, these pegs to me seem thinner than the pegs on the Marauder Gunrunners 4-inch figures. So we'll see. For the purpose of the reviews, I like to just try to do it usually out of package, unless it's very clearly going to be an issue, because pulling out the old hair dryer is such a pain. But that looks pretty good. As long as you aren't too ham-fisted about it, just be careful, be patient. It should be fine. I'm not going to get into a huge articulation review of her, but the important parts that I do want to cover are the shoulders. It's often a bummer when the shoulders don't go up enough. Her armor here is nice and floppy, so it's not going to impede any shoulder movement. It'll just move with it. And she's actually able to even do the Centurion's Power Extreme pose. You'll be seeing a lot more of Centurions on this channel in a month or so. The pointing finger is nice, although, is the finger crooked? It feels as though it's pointing a little in that direction a little too much. That's some nitpicking for you. Just off a little bit. It's something I've never really noticed because I haven't seen too many pointing fingers, but I wonder if that feels pretty stiff right there. I don't think that's something that could really be corrected with a hot bath or a hair dryer. Well, that seems to work better if you turn it this way. There you go. And with the thumbs up, very cool. She's such a stoic character, very John Wayne-like. And I think that hand attachment really suits her well. Kind of like Snake Eyes, if Snake Eyes could talk. And I'll look at some of her weapons. This is the boomerang, which fits into the side holster. And if you grab one of the gripping hands, just be very slow with those. It's easy to forget and just start playing around, but this is, despite some of the bendiness of some of the joints, you do want to be careful with those stiff wrist joints. I hope she's able to reach. Doesn't look like she's got quite, well, just the end of it. That's a little awkward looking. She might be able to, if you use one of the open claw hands. For some reason she comes with two left claw hands and one right claw hand. But you could use this, kind of grabbing her side piece there. That works as well. Or you could put her in various throwing poses. This is where the open reaching hand I think will look good. You have one hand like that, and the other hand in behind, throwing it. Or use the one with the flame attachment to it. That does look quite nice. Translucent plastic there. They did a similar one, not with fire, but Panthros nunchucks. They did one where it looks like it's spinning. So it's nice when you get both weapons in standard stoic version as well as action version. And here's the teeny tiny pair of handcuffs included. They don't actually open up. And I don't see any way to attach them to her. There's no clip on her belt. So I guess the best you can do is just maybe put those on the boomerang like that. It's kind of messy, but it works. Maybe she just pulled them out from in behind, kind of like she's got a communicator back there, and she's also got this thing back there, and she's also got another thing. They would do that a lot on cartoons. It was just somehow back there, maybe in subspace. And here's the other communicator. This thing appears to be a little too wide to be held in that hand, and then doesn't really sit in this kind of claw hand very well. Holding it at a strange angle. It's not really how a communicator would be held. And that's kind of ridiculous for how many hands are included, that there aren't any hands that will really hold this communicator very well. I guess sort of like that, if you rest it. I don't really see the purpose for that one. There's this flip open communicator, and I think I've got a stress mark already. Yes, I do. From bending that pinky in order to hold the big communicator. Maybe that's why an extra hand is included. Because they look very similar to me. This is not bendy plastic right here. These fingers are far too thin to be made of this type of rigid plastic. So be careful with that. This one seems to work a little bit better though. Just the standard gripping hand grabbing the edge of the communicator. It's interesting to have, but it's really, I can't picture ever having her in a pose holding a communicator. There's a nice symbol on the other side of this one. But I would rather go with either her sitting on the Electro-Charger or using either of the weapon attachments, but just standing there basically talking on the phone. I do not like this rigid plastic material. That is far too rigid. Let's try a couple of her alternate heads. There is a little bit different hairstyle on one of them. Let's see. The face looks identical. Just looks like the hair on one is back and just turned and more up on the other. So that's such a minor change. Well, that's kind of hard to pop back on there. I don't know if that was the best use of that amount of plastic. Could have included I don't know, some other accessories, or even used a more pliable plastic for the hands. And then this head is the angry looking head, and this is actually a lot more difficult to pop the heads back on. They come off very easily, but a lot of force is required to pop them back on. There actually seems to be some kind of a problem with this one. It will not pop back on. It won't give you that pop no matter how hard you push it. It just kind of, it stays on. It's on there. It will actually support the weight of the entire figure, but it's not popping on. That's strange. A couple of QC issues here, unfortunately. I want to see if this will come off, because there was an episode where she had to slip out of her armor because some villain had attached himself onto her, I think on Lino as well. I'm just trying to figure out how that would come apart. I don't think it's removable. It's actually, looks like it's glued onto the body. That's too bad. That could have been a really easy alternate costume for Mandora, just popping that right off, but that appears to be glued on there. Yeah, it is. So that's a look at the Mandora figure, and it's a very nice sculpt, but unfortunately a couple of quality control problems, and the armor not being removable is a real puzzler to me. That would have been very easy, and there's removable armor on some of the other Thundercats figures, and I do not understand why, with all of the extra stuff going on with this figure, a very easy extra like that wasn't done, other than I guess they just wanted it to sit correctly on the figure, and it might have looked a little looser and floppier if it wasn't glued on. But let's look at the Electro-Charger. Some of the Super 7 figures are lacking in quality, but their Thunder Tank, which is in behind there, was fantastic. So I'm hoping that their Electro-Charger will also be fantastic. And for anyone who's wondering if there's going to be a review on the Thunder Tank, Super 7 Thunder Tank, I already did one. Thank you, Patreon tribe. It's a Patreon exclusive. And some accessories that come along with it. Now this is the one she, I believe, used to fight the living ooze. And it looks like there's a stand in here as well. And on the box it says there's a couple of play features on here, which is great. The Thunder Tank had a number of play features which are actually really fun play around with. And the Electro-Charger has a few as well. It's nice that it's not just a display piece. Mentions there are retractable wheels. I think that just... I have no idea how to do this, but these clips, looks like they pop out. How would you deploy those wheels? Oh, there's a latch in the back here. It looks like you can, oh, you just push that in and the wheel pops down or pops up. So once you pop the wheel down, close that up, and I guess you just put that in behind Mandora's back. That's where she stores it. And then the front wheel, I think there should be enough room in there. Ooh, that is not really intended for a larger person like myself. It's hard to get my fingers in there. But deploy the wheels, you can have it be an actual bike that rolls instead of just a hover looking thing. It's a little on the wobbly side. There is a kickstand though, so that helps a little bit. There is also that antenna that we saw, which plugs right into the far back here. This is fairly floppy material, and it seems like a tight fit. Looks like it should plug. Oh yeah, there we go. A little bit of creaking there, but goes in. Nice light in the back here. No electronics on here, nothing lights up, but some really nice shading here. Very, very subtle exhaust. Dirt on either side here. It's clean other than that, but just the subtlest little exhaust dirt there. That's painted on star. Some metallic paint. That looks like it might be translucent right there. Translucent metallic looking light. Very nice light on the front. These are very nice as well. And there's a gimmick. So the front dashboard has swappable control panels, and on the other side there's a magnet glued onto it. So instead of pressing it in there and breaking a peg eventually, you can magnetize it in there and it holds great, and you can just easily slide it out. And there's another control panel with another graphic on it, but it fell out. The glue wasn't strong enough, so I'm going to have to glue that back into place. And my favorite glue of choice is Gorilla Super Glue Gel. Doesn't take a lot, just a teeny tiny amount there. And if this happened to you as well, make sure the shiny metal part goes on the inside. Stick it in there and let it dry for a few seconds. It looks like a little bit squeezed out the side. So I want to make sure that's completely dry before I stick it in there, because I don't want to glue it right into the panel there. And let's take a look at the stand that's included. Square on one end, circular on the other. A bit of an angle on it, depending on how you want to display it, either diving or taking off. And it just plugs. You have to, no, you don't. You don't have to open up the kickstand. There's a hole in there. You can either do that, have it sort of swooping down to see what mess Lion-O has created, or turn it around in a takeoff position, slightly takeoff. It's very subtle either way, but that's a nice feature, being able to swap it either way, or I'm assuming you can have it banking as well. If you pop it in on the side, banking in. Very nice. Nice design. And I think our glue has dried, so we can just pop that in there. I kind of like that a little more than all these control sticks that kind of looks like arcade control sticks. And the glue is holding enough that that panel won't pop out again. And here's the weapon that the bike came with, and that looks like a really big handle compared to a really small grip. So I think that would cause some more stress marks if you use one of the big open claw hands. That will sort of work, but it's not really grabbing the gun securely. And the other end of it has a little handle. Nice little star on the side there. So she could hold it with one hand while blasting with the other. I don't feel like potentially breaking this thing by doing that, but it comes with a spray effect. I believe they call it soap. And it would be nice if it attached to the bike somehow. Taking a look around the bike, I guess you could just stick it in that nook or this cranny here in the back. You might be able to just store it all in behind there. There's quite a bit of space back there. Or up here, you could just stick it in there. It'd be a bit of a challenge to fit both the tank as well as the nozzle and the hose all in there, but that could be an option. Those are all fun little extras, but the really important thing is, does the figure fit on here? And it is a two-seater, so Mandora can sit on the front, and you can have a passenger in the back like Lion-O. Now, those handles, again, like that nozzle, kind of wide, and her hands kind of small. So, in this case, I really do want this figure displayed on the Electro-Charger. I don't want just the hands resting like that, so I am going to break out the hairdryer and see how much I can loosen those hands up. But the problem is, there is a definite stress mark along that thumb. I don't know if you can see that. Right along the thumb there's a white stress mark from using a hairdryer to make this really brittle plastic bendy. So that is not cool. Should have had a lot more pliable hands if it's going to be a character that's going to be gripping handlebars on a vehicle. And unfortunately, there isn't really any proper way to rest her feet. They can't sit up into these little gaps. Her feet are on the actual exhausts, like this. That is a big thing for when a figure is being displayed on a vehicle, being able to sit on it correctly, and it's the same problem with the figures in the Thunder Tank. The Thunder Tank is fantastic, but the figures just can't really sit in it properly, and none of the Super 7 figures can really sit. Not in the tank, and apparently not really on the Electro-Charger. She has to burn her ankles off to ride the Electro-Charger. That is not how I was hoping this figure would display on the Electro-Charger. And having her stand next to it just kind of seems silly. It's her vehicle, she should be able to ride it. It's like Panthro standing next to the Thunder Tank. Let's give her a passenger on the back and see how that works. The Lion-O figure is not going to be much more posable than she is, but he'll hopefully be able to fit on there. You got to be careful when you're holding on to the rider with the claw shield. You don't want to puncture anything. And we'll just get rid of the Sword of Omens. Kind of the same deal. He just doesn't have the range in his hips in order to sit. These figures are meant to stand, not sit. Well, I suppose one way that these toys help us revert or reminisce about our childhood days is that it brings us back to a time where we would say, oh well, not a big deal. So that's pretty much what you're going to have to do with this whole thing. You can either nitpick, and there's a lot to nitpick about here. I totally understand someone saying, I'm a pass on that. There's just too many things to deal with here. Me being probably one of the bigger Mandora fans in the Thundercats fandom, I gotta say, for her very first figure ever, plus her Electro-Charger, which I didn't know if we'd ever see a Mandora figure, let alone her bike. It's pretty disappointing. This is actually one of the most disappointing things I think I've ever done a review for on this channel. I would say this is right up there with that Greenlight Fall Guy truck that I did as a Patreon exclusive some years back, because it was just such a nightmare. It kept falling apart. And this has some very nice stuff to it, but in terms of playing around, it can't touch the Thunder Tank. That is tons of fun to futz with, move around, play around, use the features. This looks nice. That's about it. Let's see what Lion-O looks like on this thing. His hand is got a much wider grip than Mandora, so he easily grips the handle, and then the claw shield easily as well. Well, that's interesting. Lion-O seems to sit on the Electro-Charger. Well, that's an awkward angle for the legs. Again, the pushing them back like that doesn't really look all that good. Putting them down, now you're burning your ankles on the exhausts. So there's the Electro-Charger from Super 7, along with the Mandora figure. The Electro-Charger is maybe salvageable if they ever do another version of Mandora, and I think that would probably be a strong possibility. After all, they've done a couple of repaints and upgrades and tweaks already. So I wouldn't be surprised to hear that another Mandora is coming out, fixing some of the issues that the previous one had. Sure would be nice if there's some sort of compensation or appreciation showed to the people who bought the original inferior version, for when any company does that. Some kind of discount would be appreciated if someone decides to purchase again, just to take advantage of all the fixes. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed this look at the Evil Chaser, and thank you for being a subscriber if you're already a subscriber. If you're not, feel free to hit that subscribe button to join the tribe. And thank you to all of the supporters on the Patreon tribe. And just did a month of May member list shout out, exclusive video on there. That was fun to go through that list and try to pronounce some of the names on there. See a lot of familiar faces going back even years, some of them. So thank you all for supporting the channel. And also a shout out to the channel members, the channel panel as I call them. we are just one member away, I believe, to another custom emoji. I believe. So if we just get one more channel member, I'll put up a poll with a couple of different options, and you'll be able to decide what is the next custom emoji you want to be able to use in the comments to these videos. Maybe an Autobot symbol, maybe a Robocop symbol, or probably a Mandora symbol wouldn't win. But it's fun to be able to see some of those custom emojis in there, and sometimes people ask, how did you get the Decepticon symbol? Or how did you get the Optimus Prime? Or how did you get the He-Man emoji? Well, those are only available to channel members. You'll also see the custom badges as well, the orange and blue military-style badges, depending on how long you've been a channel member. So thank you to all who have become a channel member as well. Thank you for watching the video, and until next time, Nerdmas Day.